We're talking burgers and fireworks and all kinds of groovy stuff here on Road Gang Radio, hashtag RGR. We couldn't ask for a better guest. He's actually been with us before a long time ago. It's great to have him back. Go to hamburgerdreams.com. Author of Hamburger Dreams, How Classic Crime-Solving Techniques Help Crack the Case of America's Greatest Culinary Mystery, Chris Carosa is an MBA from Yale University. He painstakingly researched the origin story of hamburger and shares little-known facts about the evolution of the humble beef patty in America. It's good to have you back, Chris. Happy pre-4th of July, and welcome to Road Gang Radio.
Well, it's glad to be back. How are you guys doing?
Oh, no complaints. No complaints.
I'm good, Chris. Hi, Chris. I'm Lindsay. I have not gotten to talk to you before, but I have to start out and ask, how did you get the best job in the world, which is talking about and diving into burgers? What made you say you were like the greatest example of how to make your dreams come true? If there's something you love, just make it a part of your life. You're like, I assume you love burgers, because if you don't, you're definitely in the wrong position. But what made you say, I'm going to dedicate my life to the beauty that is the grease and cheese of our lives?
Well, it was totally by accident. I was in college my senior year, the last term of senior year. I had a free spot to take a class, and I wanted to not take a class. But my classmates convinced me to take an architecture class on the study of the city. And the point was that there was no final on it. You didn't have to take a test. You just wrote a story or an essay about the city you were born in. I was born in Buffalo.
Sign me up.
And in the process of doing that, I took out all the books from the Yale's library about Buffalo, all 4 of them, actually 3 books and 1 newspaper article. And the newspaper article talked about the hamburger being invented in Buffalo. I had never heard of that story. And I ran down and I told my nearest classmate, hey, guess what? The hamburger was invented in my hometown. He said, no, it wasn't. It was invented right here in New Haven. And he promptly took me to Louis' Lunch where he bought me a hamburger. And I said, oh, okay. And I kind of just sat on that for about 30 or 40 years. And I wrote a book about the history of Greater Western New York. And this was a chapter. And during the book tour, this turned out to be a really popular topic when I would talk to people. So I said, well, you know what? Let's find the real story, because there were 3 or 4 or 5 competing histories about where the first hamburger was sold. And voila, I just wrote the book on it.
By the way, Lindsay, Chris was elected president of the National Society of Newspaper Columnists for a 2-year term back in 2018, and the New York Press Associations gave you an honorable mention for the best news or feature series category. That series of articles that you wrote are the foundation of Hamburger Dreams, and I wanted to ask you from a process standpoint, even all these years back, can you kind of tell people how one goes about the business of taking a series of articles and actually turning them into a full-fledged book? There's a spine here of detective work that goes on as well, correct?
Yeah, you know, the newspaper articles are sort of like the Reader's Digest version of the book. So I actually was in the process of researching the book, writing chapters in the book, and I decided, well, you know, let's test this out, give it a dry run. And that's why I wrote the newspaper articles. It was a series of articles over about 7 weeks. I was very honored to receive the award from the New York Press Association on it. It was just another thing that told me, hey, this story had legs, and the book might actually do pretty well.
So you obviously let's dive into that. I've got some myths to ask about in a bit that we could bust, which you touched on in the book, but a couple of fun ones that will get people interested in this book. But the idea of, did the hamburger evolve out of necessity? Like, was it like, hey, we need a meal you can eat with one hand while wrangling kids and shooting fireworks? Like, was it that I need an all-in-one meal where I can also multitask? Is that a foundation? I know that's a little bit of a joke, but let's talk about the evolution for a little bit.
It might be a joke, but it's actually a little bit on point. So this occurred in the 1880s, in the late 1800s. So it's after the Civil War. People were starting to get back to a normal life. And the idea of carnivals or fairs or sporting events became very popular. And when people went to these things, they were often all-day affairs. So you had to eat lunch, and you had to eat while you're standing up or walking around. So yes, you needed something that you could hold in your hand and eat. So that was already occurring. I mean, the hot dog predates the hamburger, by the way. So the hot dog is an example of just another one of these sandwich foods that you can eat with your hand. What happened with the hamburger, though, is a little bit more interesting in the fact that it was not an intentional invention. It was also by accident. The two brothers who were most likely to have sold the first hamburger, Charles and Frank Mencius, they sold pork sausage sandwiches as a concessionaire in all these fairs. And at the one outside of Buffalo, the Erie County Fair, they ran out of pork sausage. They went to the butcher and tried to buy more pork, and the butcher, for a variety of reasons, said, no, I'm not going to sell you more pork. I don't want to slaughter a whole pig just for 10 pounds of pork. Here, try this ground beef. They were very reluctant to try ground beef because at that point in time, ground beef was considered a very low-class sort of food, sort of like bologna or something like that. And they had no choice, so they had to try it. They formed it into patties the same way that they formed the pork sausage into patties, and they served it in the same bread, which is a wedge, a V-shaped wedge cut from a loaf of bread. And that's really how the hamburger started. They didn't even have a name for it. The name for it came just totally out of the air. Frank tells a story that somebody came up to him and said, what do you call this thing? And he had no name. They were just doing it out of necessity. The name of the fair that they were at was named after the town they were in. So it wasn't just called the Erie County Fair. It was called the Hamburg Fair because the town is Hamburg, New York. So he called it a Hamburg sandwich. And everyone thinks that story is way too cute by half. But in the research that I did, I looked at newspapers from that year, from that same Erie County Fair, and there's a story about cheese, a vendor selling cheese, and somebody come up to him and say, hey, what do you call this cheese? And the vendor said, we call it Hamburg cheese. So it was a common naming convention at that time.
It's interesting, by the way, because, and this is a genuine question as opposed to just, me knowing the answer. This is a situation where the thing exists before it's actually nomenclatured, where the thing actually is a real thing before it actually kind of gets solidified. And this is one of the ways that things actually have their origin story, correct? The idea that it's like, look, it's existed for a long time, but at some point somebody's got to coin it and kind of package it and market it. You could make a case that while the hamburger might have existed in other places in very, very close forms, this is the first time that people really kind of assign an actual, almost make it kind of, this is its coming out party, as it were.
But real quick, Jim, when you're coining it, Jim and Chris, when you're coining it, it's like, well, let's call it Hamburg. And they're like, no, that's too spot on. All right, Hamburg. Like we just went through the on. It's like it's the Mitch Hedberg comedy skit where he's like, what are we calling this? I'm a member of the club, let's call it a club sandwich. I'm not even a member. That's what this reminds me of right here.
Yeah.
Well, I tried to find out when did the name change from Hamburg or Hamburg sandwich to hamburger, and it's really hard to pinpoint it. It definitely occurred by the turn of the century, 1900. You started seeing hamburger appear, but before that, there was just really Hamburg sandwich. If you look at menus, they're listed as Hamburg sandwiches. But to your point about something being invented before the name is coined, you know what a great example of that is? The cheeseburger. The cheeseburger, the story says that the cheeseburger was invented in Southern California in the late 1920s, when in fact, hamburgers and cheese went together almost from the very beginning. There's newspaper articles from the early 1890s about street vendors selling hamburgers in Chicago and putting cheese on it. So that type of sandwich existed, but the name didn't occur until maybe 30 or 40 years later.
By the way, another great example of that, and this is well documented actually, there's a lot of research around this, is that there were chocolate chip cookies before there were chocolate chips. I don't know if you know that, that actually the original chocolate chip cookies were basically candy bars broken up and then thrown into the cookie dough. And it was only later on that the people who actually made the dough said, what if we made chips that people could put in here? It's the absolute truth. So that I just think that's kind of spectacular that you have a chocolate chip cookie before you actually have any chocolate chips you can get it from. You had to make your own chips. And in many ways, your book is the story of marketing in America and how people, not only make things to eat, but how they make things to eat and get the word out and sell those things. Is that fair?
Absolutely spot on. Charles and Frank Menches, they were serial entrepreneurs. They were involved in a lot of different businesses. But one of the things that they did well was marketing. Almost every aspect in every business that they did, there was a marketing component, and they were natural at it. They were the guys who invented the first version of Cracker Jacks. It was called Gee Whiz when they made it. They invented the waffle cones, that you put ice cream on. So they were one of the first people to have movie theaters. So there was all different sort of businesses, all entertainment, confectionery-based type businesses. But marketing was key. When you read their talk, when they're interviewed in the media, you can just sense that they really knew what it took to market. But it's not just them. Charlie Negreen, who's the competing hamburger story out of Wisconsin, was also a good marketer, a great marketer. His nickname is Hamburger Charlie. So he was, I think, the reason why they were so good at marketing was because they started their business life in these carnivals and fairs. And everyone knows the stereotype carnival barker, super marketer. Well, in order to survive and really thrive in that kind of environment, you have to know a lot about marketing and sales and how to talk to people.
Well, and the marketing genius here, because let's talk about kind of the how it becomes because it's an icon of Americana. I mean, we've got fireworks, burgers, they're like basically in the Constitution. And so I think you'll appreciate this, Chris. When I was in 6th grade, I went abroad. I did it like an exchange camp, and it was 2 boys and 2 girls and an adult leader from 14 different or 17 different countries all around the world. And we'd go, stay at a camp, and each country got to host a night, like their cultural night. And so I will never forget, this was obviously very, very long ago, but I will never forget Japan shows up and they're in kimonos and they're doing these beautiful dances and with music and this wonderful food. And every country has such, it feels so steeped in history. Obviously we are younger than them all. But so when it comes to America, for the USA to do our theme night, we show up wearing poodle skirts, doing the hand jive to a Beach Boys song, and serving hamburgers and French fries. Obviously, the French fry piece didn't obviously make sense because we know the origin story of that. But I just love looking back and being like, America, poodle skirts and burgers. And that was our theme night. And, of course, it was the most popular night that every country was like, that's the one I want to be a part of. So how does it become an icon? How is the burger, and then we're going to talk about if McDonald's was or was not the actual one to serve it first as fast food, but like an icon. Is it just a stamp of marketing genius, or is this really the idea that a burger is something that it's got staying power because it's balanced, protein, carbs, fat, sauce. It's like engineered to satisfy every craving, right?
Well, first, let me confirm your story, just with some of my own stories. When I've talked to people on the international set, certainly they identify hamburgers with America. And this actually came up in the book. It was speaking of McDonald's, Ray Kroc tried to do a little publicity stunt by sending one of his vice presidents to Hamburg, Germany, with a certificate thanking them for inventing the hamburger, because that's a popular myth is that it came from Hamburg, Germany. And the mayor got the certificate and said, "What's this?" And we didn't invent the hamburger. That was invented in America. So even Hamburg, Germany knows that the hamburger is from America. And it is iconic. Part of the reason why I think it might be so is because what's another iconic image of America? It's the cowboy. If you look at it from an international standpoint, they'll look at Americans as cowboys. They're all cowboys. And what do cowboys do? Well, they didn't really make the hamburgers originally. They roasted the beef, or they had beef in their cookouts. But that it's sort of the two things go together, and so that's why I think the hamburger is really the image that you associate America with. Although, ironically, hot dogs, is there anything more American than a hot dog? I mean, that's how
baseball
the song goes. Baseball, right, and all that.
Put them together.
And in fact, hot dogs were served early on, before hamburgers were served, at baseball parks. So they do predate the hamburger that way. And in the 1940s, when the King of England came to visit President Roosevelt,
big deal. It's a big deal.
A hot dog.
Yeah,
they served a hot dog. The hamburger people kind of got upset. There's a guy out of Chicago who said, you know what, the hamburger should be in the American sandwich, not the hot dog. So he started this movement to push hamburgers as the American meal. I didn't officially get anywhere. It was a fun thing. It was a publicity thing. Going back to marketing, I mean, this is just another example of how you market it. And all this, again, it predates McDonald's and fast food.
By the way, Lindsay, and I know Chris knows this too, there is a wonderful movie where Bill Murray plays Franklin Roosevelt for that event called Hyde Park on the Hudson, where basically the fate of the free world rests on the fact that will the King of England and his wife, in fact, eat a hot dog together, and will they do it up at Hyde Park? And a lot of Americans, he used that moment of them.
So romantic.
I mean, it's wonderful because basically Roosevelt wanted the United States to see the royals as regular people worth supporting in the upcoming war, and so the King of England literally eats a hot dog on the front lawn with a bunch of kids dressed up like Native Americans behind him while he does it, by the way. And I'm just letting you guys know, our friend Beach Bum and Doodah Man have me laughing over here on the chat, Chris. They're calling Buffalo now Beefalo. And Beach Bum says Beefalo is definitely good. Buffalo by itself is too dry. Fantastic. I wanted to kind of do a follow-up question on the marketing stuff here, because you could say it's hamburger carnival bar, what is it, carnival barker, supermarketer, but America is as much apple pie. It's marketing too. I mean, that's America's great contribution to the world of economics. I mean, we're the first country to really figure out if you're going to have a free market, you got to be free to use your freedom of speech to get your product out there, right there. I mean, that really is the key to marketing, is the courage and the knowledge that nobody will stop you from saying what you have to say to sell your stuff. I don't know if that question made any sense, but it just occurred to me in this conversation.
I wrote a column for this week's paper almost exactly about that, not about hamburgers, but about how when America was formed, this whole idea of people being responsible for their own lives and free markets, it really came about because of our Constitution, and it allowed people to explore things in ways that they never before had. And what did that mean? Exactly what you said. If you're going to be successful in business, which the free market allows you to do, you have to know how to market yourself, how to advertise, how to talk about what you're doing in a way that makes people buy. Now, of course, if you think back to the 1800s, you think of snake oil salesmen, all the negative stuff with regard to that. But there's a lot of positive stuff, too. And that really came out. I have actually done a series of articles on marketing and advertising starting from the early 1900s. This is the original Mad Men I'm talking about. And it's just it's a fascinating topic.
Lindsay, really quickly, I just wanted to add this too, and remind me at some point later on in the show, talk about Ben Franklin and the coonskin cap. Go ahead, though. You've got a question, right, Lou?
Well, no, I just want to break down that, with so many burger joints and restaurants now, this has been happening for a long time in the foodie land, but trying to elevate the hamburger. I'm just wondering your take on if there's such a thing as too fancy with the truffle aiolis on a burger and eggs and whatnot. Now, I don't think that's a bad thing. I think it's great that people get creative. I just don't think that's a burger. I'm not going to say don't do that, but to me, a burger is a burger. I want a burger. I want cheese, and I want all the cheese personally, and maybe some grilled onions. But when it starts getting all the accoutrements on it, I'm like, now you've lost me. Now it's not a burger. Now it's like a cultural delectable situation. But can we still call that a burger when there's 92 things on it, is what I'm trying to say, in your opinion.
So I actually agree with you. I like a plain vanilla burger, not a lot of fancy stuff on it. But again, just to riff off of this marketing thing, there's an author by the name of Eugene Schwartz, who wrote a book about the breakthrough marketing. And one of the things he talks about is if you're not first to a market, then you have to sell a variation on a theme. And that's what you're seeing with these different versions of the hamburgers. It's still a basic burger. I mean, assuming that it has meat in it, because I guess there's non-meat burgers too. But the idea is that the concept is the same. So in people's mind, burger has an image in their head. They know what it is. Now, if you add something to it, whatever it is, put it on there. It's now fancy. It's a craft burger. I guess that's what the marketing terminology is for it now. It's fancy and it's different, and it brings people to your restaurant because no one else is selling a hamburger like that. So it's part of the marketing schematic that's not just in hamburgers, but you see the same thing in cars, in almost every type of popular consumer item. You see this variation of the theme playing out in the marketing.
I guess well, I'm sorry, real quick, Jim. That poses one more question because you said as long as there's beef in it. So now we've got, we have the meatless patties, the tofu burgers, the black bean burgers, etc. But we can't call that a burger, can we? Veggie burgers
they are.
And such, yeah.
There's a reason why they're calling it burger, because it's easier to sell than, say, tofu sandwich. You want a tofu sandwich, or would you rather have a tofu burger? I mean, I would rather have neither.
Yeah.
By the way, the both of you are actually talking about possibly the greatest episode of Parks and Rec ever created, where Rob Lowe and our good friend Ron Swanson have a burger off, and Rob Lowe makes his turkey burger for everybody, and he has all kinds of complexities and proper temperature and all this kind of scientific measuring, and Swanson shows up with beef, buns, and pickles, and mustard, and cheese. And literally everybody eats it, and he can't understand why he's losing. And then Rob Lowe bites into that burger and says, "Oh my God, you're so right." I mean, there is something about a basic burger that just stirs the soul, isn't there, Chris?
Oh yeah, and I really like that episode, by the way.
It's like Preston Sturges was a showrunner, by the way. There is a real feeling of that, too. There is something in the style of the writing of the book and the way you kind of put it together, too, that also harkens back to a different time. Because in many ways, you could put the burger at the center of culture of the 40s, 50s, and 60s as well, right? I mean, it feels like America is built around the burger during that time period, even right down to the architecture. Is that fair?
Oh, yeah. I mean, in fact, you look at, Wimpy from Popeye, I'll gladly pay you Tuesday for a hamburger today. So that became popular in the 1930s, and it sort of set the stage for what happened after World War II. Once people started getting cars, they had to go to places where they could get food and get food fast. And these food places kind of became hangouts. I mean, you see it in like American Graffiti, movies like that. And it for some reason, hamburgers were the food of choice. Why? I mean, this is a question I haven't been able to answer. Why hamburgers instead of hot dogs? If hot dogs are, as American as apple pie, like you say, why haven't there been franchises that really, even today, you don't really see a nationwide hamburger or hot dog franchise, but there's so many that sell hamburgers. Even more ironically, Shake Shack. Shake Shack is famous now. Shake Shack is famous for its burgers. Do you know Shake Shack started as a temporary hot dog stand in New York City? And even they decided hamburgers are the way to go. So it's just interesting the way it turned out.
I think, Lindsay, sometimes that it's probably as much about the fact that it's like, and maybe the hamburger people started this, there's always been that kind of running joke of what exactly is inside of a hot dog. And it always gives people pause. Whereas with a hamburger, we know exactly what that is, don't we?
You don't want to know. If you're going to eat it, you're better off not knowing.
Yeah, I think actually Upton Sinclair started that with his book from the early 1900s. I think he wrote it.
The Jungle. Oh yeah. Oh my God. The Jungle is brutal.
The Jungle. Oh my God. I remember that in school.
Oh my God.
Let's do some Chris. Let's do some myths here that we can bust. So,
sure.
The hamburger, the McDonald's, was it the first fast food burger or not?
No, it wasn't. White Castle really was the first franchise that took off, but there were lots of regional franchises. The one I mentioned about the hamburger story to compete against the hot dog, that publicity stunt, that occurred with a small hamburger franchise out of Chicago. They had 15 restaurants. But White Castle was the one that was first notable from a nationwide standpoint.
Now, should you actually only flip a burger once, yes or no?
That's funny. A lot of people ask that question. I think it's really how you cook the hamburger, how you grill the hamburger on whether or not you do that. I flip it multiple times because I want to make sure that it's cooked evenly throughout. But there are other people who prefer not to. Just flip it once, and they like that center to be a little bit more raw than, say, other people.
Well, you're a Yale guy, so I'm going to take whatever you do. I'm going to take that to be Bible, basically. And was ketchup banned at Lewis's Lunch in New Haven? Is that true?
Well, that's a Yale question, and the answer is yes. This is one of the things that when they served the hamburger at Louis' Lunch, there's two things that I noticed immediately. One is they didn't serve it on a bun. They served it on toast, which actually is closer to what the real first hamburger was served on than a bun, because buns didn't come later. It didn't come till a few years later. The second thing was no ketchup. And what's up with that? You got to put ketchup on a hamburger.
What's up with that? What's up with that? And when you say toast, but we're not talking Texas toast, are we? Because that's a whole nother thing.
Oh, no, not Texas. No, just plain old white bread toast or whatever kind of bread they use.
All right.
Same kind of toast you have for breakfast.
I hate to do this. We are out of time, and I knew it would go the entire length. I'm telling you.
I want to talk about burgers forever.
I know, but fireworks are coming up next. By the way, Chris Carosa, who has joined us before, the name of the book is Hamburger Dreams, How Classic Crime-Solving Techniques Help Crack the Case of America's Greatest Culinary Mystery. You can find it all at hamburgerdreams.com.
That's a Yale guy for you. With a title that long, he's got to be from Yale.
But smart enough to know that he could put Hamburger Dreams there and just leave it at that on the website. Imagine if that was the website, Hamburger Dreams, How Classic Crime-Solving Techniques Help Crack the Case of America's Greatest Culinary Mystery.com. Not a good idea.
.com.
HamburgerDreams.com. Thank you, Chris. Happy 4th of July, my friend.
Yeah, happy 4th to you, too. Thanks for having me.